Well, welcome everyone to the PowerLunch. We have an awesome opportunity today to talk to Dave Sobel. Dave is Dave's a great guy. Number one, he's a great guy. Uh, he won't admit that, but he's a good guy. I mean, I'm always impressed with the fact that I can shoot him an email and he actually answers it. For a person who's as busy and has as much going on as he does. Dave, that actually does impress me. I'm a simpleton, and those little things like that are meaningful. So I hats off to you for understanding that part of integrating with people. So very good with that. Um, and the other part is that Dave knows stuff about things. So we are very lucky to sit at the hand of the master today and get his input and thoughts on a lot of things IT. So we're going to ask you to be kind of the sage, the future looker, the futurist, and kind of give us your thoughts and opinions on things. So if you're ready, Dave, maybe give most of us probably know who you are, but maybe give us an overview of who you are and any links you want to share with your media empire, because you are the P Diddy of IT. So a
Oh, you're
media
so
media
kind.
mogul. So
You're so kind. I really appreciate you having me on. And look, I'm doing what I do because I love helping IT services companies, MSPs, help run their businesses. And I think I've got a unique kind of perspective and can share it a little bit. So I ran an MSP. That's you sort of start with that. Is I was an engineer by background, launched an MSP, ran it for about a decade. It was, and I always describe it as a moderately successful MSP because there's a lot of people running around the channel that will tell you how amazing their business was. Like mine was fine, right? It was of average quality, but I was a big community guy. Got super involved. Was a Microsoft MVP, the CompTIA trainer, launched peer groups. Like I was that guy that kept volunteering for everything. And when I sold that business, and then I went and worked for some vendors because I wanted to learn more about how this was done. And those vendors were, I worked for Level Platforms. We sold that to AVG. I worked for GFI. We became Logic Now. We, of course, sold that to SolarWinds. And I stayed through about a year post IPO because I'd never gone through that process, right? And so it was all about learning more and more of each of those bits. And then when it was time, I knew it was time to try another hand at another adventure. I said the thing that I thought I could do that would be interesting was focus on a little bit of education to help MSPs and IT services companies every day. I have a podcast called The Business of Tech. It is a daily 5-minute show where I cover 2 to 4 stories every single day, and I ask the question, why do we care? So I look at the news, I pull a news article or a set of research, and then I give you my opinion of why I think that's important in context. It's available on all your favorite podcatchers. It's available as a YouTube show if you prefer video. Comes out as a 20-minute show on Mondays. We also do some bonus episodes. Where I dig into and I do interviews, and it's not the usual same talking heads of product people. I'm trying to dig into, AI, crypto, how you lead teams, and I go seek out experts where I always sort of say, I don't know enough about this. Let me go ask some expert. And I have them on the show and we have a conversation. So everything I do, you can catch at businessof.tech. That's the website. And then you can find all the different versions of it. And let's talk predictions. I did a prediction series that's available both on the audio feed and on YouTube. And Keith, I know you've got some questions about that stuff.
yep. So and it kind of slides right in there. So like, what do you see as being the current trends in just the IT space right now? From we'll start macro and then we can go micro, but what do you see as kind of the top current trends in IT?
Well, I mean, the number one trend is the move to the cloud, right? And it feels like we talk about this all the time, but what we're kind of at is where the data is telling me that the tipping point is we've hit it and we're on the downslope of that, meaning that within it's 2023 now. So as we start this off, Gartner says 80% of new workloads will be cloud by 2025. essentially saying anything new will be a cloud service. Like that will just be the way that it's done. The growth markets are all SaaS related. Anybody that we're looking at in terms of what's being deployed that's making money is SaaS. I literally just there's a story coming out on the pod tonight where I dug into the San Diego News published their top list of technologies for business owners to use, right? All of them were productivity layer stuff, CRM products, financial management products, like enabling online sales. And then their even statement was, oh, and you're going to do this all in the cloud. It's like, well, the mainstream media is talking about that, like in terms of, and I mean that in terms of like your local newspaper, the kinds of pieces that have been, so cloud kind of dominates. And then I think the other thing about it is, we could look at some of the minor stuff that's noise right now around tech layoffs and all that kind of stuff. But from when I actually dig in from a market perspective, it's like, no, tech people are hard to find. They're going to continue to be hard to find for those of us in services. Cybersecurity people, even harder to deal with. And by the way, we're going to be dealing with that mess for, at least the next, 10,000 years, it seems, because that market isn't getting any better. So I think that's that. And then I can layer on the trend of like, hey, what do we think the year is going to look like? Well, it's going to be a little choppy. I don't necessarily think it's going to be like full on horrific recession. I think it's going to look a little different than previous ones because unemployment remains low and inflation is coming down a little bit. But at the same time, interest rates are not going to go back where they were. Money's not going to be as cheap. Businesses are going to tighten up. So it's kind of a conditions that looks like that.
Interesting. I guess I have a couple of questions and I don't want to lose tracking of what you said because it fits for both of them. The first one is, with the move to the cloud, do you think that forces ISPs to be better? Because one of the things I encounter is
ISPs versus MSPs.
Yeah, ISPs versus MSPs. So that internet connection, getting it to be more robust and more predictable. Do you think it'll push that? Because now you're tethered to the cloud.
So the answer is maybe. I think I wouldn't attribute the move to the cloud as what's going to push that. I think what I'm actually going to attribute that to say is that society has recognized that broadband is a requirement, and the FCC and under pressure from both consumers and business is taking a real look at this. And I think those companies are going to try and get a little bit smarter about this before the pressure gets too high for them, and they will correct on their own. And rather than because the FCC is now doing its own part to track this, those maps are starting to get really good, and it's exposing a lot of the problems in that. And then the federal government dumped a really massive amount of money into updating broadband as a large bit and try to get to those underserved communities.
Right.
And they're going to want to deliver against that so that they're not under the bad part of the scrutiny. So I think is did cloud push it? Probably not. Do I care because I think that the market is noticing that how important this is? Probably not.
Right. When you mentioned about the underserved communities, literally where I grew up, my mother is out 30 miles in the woods, and I'm not even kidding, 30 miles into the woods, and she just got fiber.
Yeah.
I'm like, how do you have fiber in I'll say in Danbury, Wisconsin? How do you have fiber there? And
to be fair, I mean the Inflation Reduction Act and some of the moves that they made, as part of coming out of the pandemic, dumped real money into infrastructure, and each state gets to assign it in their own way. So it's federal money deployed locally.
It was a federal money project. She asked because it's like, literally, we're out here in the trees and we have fiber. Are you kidding me? So
and so you have to look and go, like, we should celebrate that, right? Like that's a great thing. Like we're spending money in the right places to build up the infrastructure. I'm looking at that and saying, like, yeah, it's going to get a little bit better because we've all agreed this is important.
No, it's cool stuff. So the other one that I didn't want us to lose track of is with, the discussion around where things are going in the future. What do you think, kind of looking forward for this year, maybe into next, are the top technology skill sets that will be in demand?
It's actually not a technology skill set, it's a business one. I think the top skill set is going to be a technologist that can translate those concepts into business need. More than anything, that's it. Like that's the spot. Because everything that you look at from a technology perspective that's valuable right now requires understanding of the businesses of your customers. That's where you need it. And so you'd be inclined to sort of say like, oh, it's technology. It's no, actually the number one bit is business skills and the ability to translate and connect business to technology. I think right behind it's going to be cyber, like anything cybersecurity.
Yeah.
I think that, that's just, I'd be remiss if I didn't say like, oh, cybersecurity is going to be it.
Russia.
Right. Well, but more just I mean, I keep saying how incredibly impressed I am by these criminal organizations. They're
really... you
really...
have to apply now, don't you? Have to give them a resume, and they look at your bad guy resume and they decide if you're bad enough.
Well,
if you have enough naughty credentials to be in a bad guy club.
I mean, we're laughing, but yes, they have HR, they've got sales, they've got affiliates, they've got marketing referrals, they publish financials. Like they are incredibly well run.
They have those little programs where if you have enough malware installed, you can go to the company store and pick out a hat. It's like...
I wouldn't be surprised if you could get a hat. But I mean, we laugh and go, they're literally disciplining. They're disciplining themselves. Like they have rules of the road on engagement. They want to make sure that they're not attacking hospitals because it's too high profile. I mean, it's just so impressive.
Yeah.
And so, the skills on the defender side are just, we need to be as good. And frankly, we prove out that we aren't.
So, okay, I'm going to rabbit trail a little bit. So that being said, do you think the sweet spot, and I know what I think, but do you think the sweet spot is in prevention, or do you think it's in recovery moving forward?
I think it's in recovery. And I actually will sort of say, like, let me layer two bits to that. So first off, you have to be really good at recovery, because you need to be in a position to tell them to go away, right? Like, go away, I'm not paying your ransom. But I also want to highlight that the attackers have started transitioning to data extortion more than raw ransomware, meaning that they're actually threatening to release data as the next step. And as I just reported on the show last week, in some cases, they're actually skipping the encryption piece. They're just now stealing the data and calling you up and saying, hey, we've got your data. If you don't pay us, we're going to give it away. Because it's actually less work for them to do that. They'll make as much money. And so in that world, my version of prevention actually looks like helping customers have less data. Do you need to collect every little bit of data all the time because you're then liable for everything that you hold on to? Or can you be very targeted on the data that you collect so that you aren't exposing as much risk and you can't be as extorted as easily?
So there's probably a conversation around persistent versus non-persistent data.
Yep.
And I would assume in that encryption becomes more important in that space.
Very much so. But also, back to my business skills, because you've got to be able to help your customers say, let's talk about what data needs to be retained, what doesn't, what is important, what isn't important. And I have to understand the businesses that I'm working with in order to make good recommendations around that. That's, again, business skills, knowing what they do and what you need to collect.
Right. Super interesting. I have a bunch of questions, but I'm just going to throw it out there for our group. Do any of you have a question for Dave here that we want to get out? Because I don't want to, if people have questions, I don't want to miss that opportunity. So you can either blurt it out now, or you can throw me something in the chat if you would like to do that too.
Nothing off limits. I'll answer anything.
Wow. With this group, that's saying
why
something.
Not? It's way more fun when you answer anything.
Buddy. So all of those things being said, and myself being a person who has just gotten in a couple of arguments with chat GBT or GPT, what do you think
Mhm.
is the future of AI and machine learning? How do you think that fits in the next year?
Super exciting. It's super interesting. AI,
Frightening.
AI and it should be. So I actually think the number one area of interest for me in AI is helping organizations with exactly the scary bit, is understanding where it should be used, how it should be used, and how you want to be transparent about it. So I freely admit I'm using it now in my actual production cycle. I've discovered ChatGPT is a way better headline writer than I ever was. I write stories; it gives me great headlines. Right, that's a good supplement to my workflow. So it doesn't replace me; it augments me. It makes me a better writer because I'm getting that element of insight. That I think is going to be more about how it gets used, how it gets integrated in. And what's going to start happening is AI is going to start showing up in the products that we use, making recommendations, just trying to accelerate. And you're going to want to help customers understand how that best works for them and where they need to be transparent about that, where they don't need to be, what their particular requirements are. And I think that's why I'm so interested in it, because it's hard and it comes with lots of cool ethical questions. And I like hard questions because they pay, right? They're the ones that that expertise is needed to do something well with. So I'm super excited. I'm hoping we're going to move more toward more transparency around how these systems are used, what the data, how they're trained, how they are, where they're implemented. And I think that's a whole space for consultants and providers to do really well.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. I took the chat GBT and did a like give me write me the code for moving a dot from the left to the right, a red dot from left to right on a screen using C sharp, and it produced the code right in front of me. And it's
Mhm.
like, I've read an article about developers are actually using it to solve coding problems that they're having and stuff like that, and it's actually generating the code.
Right.
Actually, this morning read an article about how schools are trying to handle reports and plagiarism from this AI tool, and it's kind of like it's crazy to think about, right? Because it
Right.
does. And I literally got in an argument with it. I actually think I should do a show interviewing Chat GPT.
Well, it can be, and it can have those amazing, they call them hallucinations, right? Where it can be definitively, confidently wrong. and,
Right. Right.
and that's why I also am not inclined. I'm not a one who's saying like, oh, this is going to go horrible. This is going to just completely replace people. Because I look at it and say, yeah, we're still going to need to be involved in the process, right? There's
Right.
still these are augmentative tools rather than replacement tools. That's a great space to be, and to address these questions thoughtfully. I want to be in that space, right? I want providers to be in that space, but I definitely don't think you can just sit back and say like, it's not going to impact at all. Oh, it's
Right.
going to be it's going to be a thing, and it's going to probably move a lot faster than we think. GPT-3 trained on a data set, and they already have talked about GPT-4, which is trained on a data set significantly larger, so it should be much more accurate theoretically, and we'll see it in the trials. But it's going to move pretty quickly.
Yeah. Um, I frequently feel like I need to go out and buy a 77 Ford LTD and get in the Terminator movie and go back and in time. Anyway, but yeah, it's very interesting. If it gives Elon Musk the willies, I at least should pay attention to it,
Should at least pay
right?
attention.
Should at least pay attention. Ask the question. Ask the question. um, all right. So gonna shift gears a little bit. How do you see in the next months to years, how do you see 5G technology impacting our business?
So I'm actually less. It hasn't. It's interesting how quiet it's gotten around 5G.
Mhm.
If you dig into, if I look at what happened at Consumer Electronics Show just a couple of weeks ago, 5G was no longer the talking point. They stopped talking about it. It wasn't the it wasn't the buzz. It just faded into the background. Uh, I'm inclined to think that 5G was an incremental step more than transformational. I will admit, if I go back to my own sort of thinking on predictions a couple of years ago, I thought it would be like, well, this will be a thing, but it's the applications that are going to be required that are going to make it more interesting. I think it's actually more related to your earlier question, right, around broadband generally. As broadband becomes pervasive in all the right ways, will we be able to do more with it? Yes. I think 5G just happens to be one implementation of that. And I'm actually thinking that the 5G I care more about is getting broadband everywhere versus wired versus wireless. That's really where I think this is going to happen. But so far, I mean, we haven't seen transformational medicine or complete automation with vehicles using data transfers on highways yet. Like, that stuff isn't happening. But I don't think it's because of 5G. I think it's because of limitations of the other technologies.
Mhm. So is 5G kind of got in the way of the Segway? Everyone thought it was going to change society, but it's kind of not.
Well,
But I think,
I
I
don't think
just,
it was going to do it alone.
right.
I think it wasn't just all of a sudden having a little bit more broadband did it. But by the way, the other thing that there's a subtlety to 5G is of course we are at 5G now, but we're just at the first versions of 5G because by the carrier's own admission, they rolled out the first versions. They moved their equipment to new equipment that handles new spectrum, and they intend to advance that on the same spectrum for a period of time. So bandwidth should increase using the new equipment over the next few years.
I just talked to a customer in Los Angeles, and they're in LA, right?
Right.
And they're talking about they have a 1 meg connection. I'm like, a 1 meg connection in LA? Like, yeah, that's all it's available. Like, really? They have a US bank around the corner from them. I'm like, there's got to be something available. And actually, in talking to some of the providers from a physical connection perspective, yeah, that's what's available in that spot, unless they want to plow something in, right? But AT&T has a 5G wireless that they can use. So
Yep.
that's kind of an interesting thing where, okay, we can get the bandwidth we need. They didn't know about it, but we can get the bandwidth we need from the 5G connection. Now, the challenge I have with it mentally is how long it will take to roll it out because of the antenna density. It's kind of a little bit of a challenge, but like you said, being able to bring that wireless or that option to businesses that might not otherwise have it is kind of a cool thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Right. Um, in general, where do you see offerings for MSPs go? And you can take a stab at that, or I can clarify if you want. Which do you feel like you understand the question?
No, I have a
Do
good
you
idea.
see it changing, the offerings that MSPs have? Like, what do you see as being kind of the in-demand offerings for MSPs? Do you see a shift coming in that?
Oh, I totally do. And the game I like to play is the one that I did. My most popular video is a video I did called "If I Was Starting an MSP Today." And I think that exercise is what's super useful to think about. If without the legacy, if you were to go start a managed services provider in the broadest sense today, what would that look like? And that would, in my mind, I would be focusing on some productivity layer offering, probably some expertise in a line of business application, or helping them if they're just a general knowledge worker, like helping them with making sure their Microsoft 365 data flows are really, really optimized for the business, or whatever the association management software is, or healthcare imaging, or whatever that expertise is. I'd be really, really good at that. And I would do everything in the cloud, right? I would I would build their entire set of systems in the cloud. And all of the old school managed services provider stuff like help desk and laptops and all that garbage, like I just wouldn't, that would not be my core focus. My core value would be in saying, I'm going to help you with your business, be the best medical records processor or large association, whatever it is, whatever that business is, I'd be the best at helping them with their technology to drive more membership or drive more revenue or drive more product sales or whatever their metric is using technology. And that would be my core offering. And I would do everything in the cloud. So I would employ a lot of business type people, right? Like people that combine that earlier skill of business and technology. And the reason I think the exercise is useful to go from if I had no legacy is because there's probably competitors springing up doing that right now. If you're a young 20-something getting into IT services, what's the business you're going to build look like? Well, it probably look like that, right? Meaning they're the competitor. So anybody who's been doing it for a long time better recognize that that's what the competitor is going to look like. So thus, where does the existing provider need to go? Well, they need to look like the new competitors in order to make sure they're relevant for the future. And so that's how I back into the answer to the question you asked. What does a current provider need to look like? Well, you need to be moving toward where your competitor is going to be.
Interesting. Question from the group. Are MSPs having success with RPA, specifically bots that perform repetitive tasks?
It's interesting. I actually did an interview with a guy who focuses entirely on RPA. So it's on my YouTube channel if you're interested in that. And he dug into exactly how that works. And it's a version of what I've been saying, is that he focuses on having business consultants that can go in and work with their clients and make sure that they are implementing those repetitive tasks with RPAs. And what his guidance is that you have to go deep, right? This is not something you flirt with. It's not something you do on the side. It's something you've got to invest in a core competency. And it seems those providers that are doing it, that are investing in it, are getting exactly the return I would talk about being in the productivity layer. So yes, I'm seeing it. Now, am I seeing it broadly? Meaning, like 90, 100% of MSPs? No, like totally not. Because it's hard, right? It's hard and it's not for every business. And it's, it requires a certain specialty, and it probably requires a certain size on the end customer too. Not all end customers are going to be perfect for it. So I think it's a big area that you can be successful in. I think you can go very deep in it. And I wouldn't say that every customer or every MSP can do it.
All right, thanks for that question. Let's see. I'm going to pivot a little bit. Do you have any thoughts on the future and securing the Internet of Things? Do you see the Internet of Things was kind of a hot topic? I mean, I don't know that you just don't hear about it as much as you used to. Maybe people are getting used to it. So what do you see happening in the Internet of Things space?
Well, it's still there, right? So if we get really into it, it's actually been a kind of an exciting year for those with Matter as a standard being rolled out, and now there's a lot of there's the move toward, particularly if I'm looking at the consumer and the that prosumer and home automation kind of stuff. They've really started standardizing that space. Matter is going to be a big deal for interoperability. You're going to have the device makers all talking to one another. I actually think they're going to start building actual solutions on top of that. It's going to flow into what we're seeing in a business. In some of the businesses, you can see it in the ideas of smart buildings and smart cities. I think it's one of those buzzwords that was always never a very good one, and then has fallen back into this idea of just data enabled. Like this idea that everything is data enabled and you can build good modern businesses around that transformation. It's all that productivity layer, right? It's all about making a business more productive with the stuff that they've got. I hate digital transformation as a phrase, but it's not wrong, right? Like it's the core idea of making sure that businesses are using modern technology to optimize their business process. That's ultimately pulling together all of these pieces of technology. Smart internet things are not useful unless they're doing stuff. Well, that's digital transformation.
And do you think that that's, do you think part of it is folding standard security practices around those Internet of Things items because to reduce the risk? Because if we think of some of the breaches that have happened, they kind of came in through early versions of the Internet of Things. If you think about like HVAC systems and building controls, those kind of were backdoor items that people could exploit.
Well, I
So,
think the answer there is zero trust. Like, I think that because I mean, and zero trust is not easy, right? And like all things in security, you never get there. It's always a journey that
yes,
never
yeah,
ends, right?
yep,
Like,
yep.
security is a sinkhole I keep throwing money into. But the idea is that and I don't like the security space, right? Like when I actually take my customers' money, I want to spend it on things that get them stuff, not
Mhm.
like protect it. But I'm also not crazy, and I know you've got to spend money on being secure. The promise of zero trust is the idea that we're actually going to assume breach. We're going to build systems in a way where we're constantly re-verifying access. And so in theory, if a properly implemented zero trust infrastructure and architecture will allow those Internet of Things devices to fit right into the fold, and we will only give them access that they are required at the time. We're going to re-verify it all the time. We will not always leave them as an access point forever, for all time. They have to revalidate every single time that it's allowed. I think it's about zero trust. It seems to me that there's big investments in zero trust, both in public sector and in private sector. The U.S. government, there's an executive order to move towards zero trust architectures, by September 2024. Like,
So do you think
it's
that?
not that far off.
No, it's not. Do you think that blockchain starts playing a larger role in that space?
It certainly could be a piece of it. There's blockchain is one of those interesting technologies that I'm waiting for somebody to start actually implementing in a way that makes sense.
Right.
Uh,
It
I don't.
feels like there's something there, but it's like, when is the dam going to break on it? Right. It's like,
Right. It's
what's going to be the
somebody.
killer app?
Yeah, somebody has to, and I was literally reading a piece last week about the way that they're starting to consider using blockchain on war crimes reporting. It was super interesting that the idea of what's going on in Ukraine, you need a way of validating that video and audio that was taken at the time is genuine, and perhaps starting to document what's happening on the battlefield using blockchains allows them to track and go back and understand how to prosecute in the event that they need to do war crimes against leaders. It's like, well, okay, that makes sense to me, right? Like, that's an area where that, like, the logging capability and the validation of blockchain starts making sense. Now, it's a really weird, obscure use case that I would not have thought about 4 years ago. I think blockchain is one of those interesting technologies that we just need to find its applications for. Anybody that tells me that that a technology will change everything and be part of every single bit, you have to be super skeptical of it, and that tends to be the crypto folks that are again gone really deep on that stuff. But I did an interview with an expert in crypto that said exactly the same thing.
Do you see anything that excites you or has caught your interest in technology helping supply chain issues?
I haven't seen anybody, like, any particular one thing that like immediately jumped to me, but I will say I've been interested in everybody's rethinking of the way supply chains work. You can see the smart companies that are starting to diversify their supply chain, recognizing to look for those single points of failure. Again, Apple being the premier instance of a supply chain organization. They are better at this than anybody, right? And they've made lots of savvy moves over the past 2 or 3 years. And I look at them saying they're diversifying their chip manufacturing and what countries those come from and how that's all run. You look at it from the perspective of business more than a technology solution is what's intrigued me about what's happening in supply chain.
Right, right. Um, do you have any thoughts around deep fake technology? Have you had time to think about that? I know it's kind of a buzzword right now, but have you any thoughts around deep fake type tech?
It's super scary because
Mhm.
I mean, the example that I always use is, imagine if we could no longer trust video in legal proceedings. Like, what is, you're just coming off jury
Yeah, I'm
duty.
just coming
Imagine,
up to you, and that, yeah, a good portion
and
of it was that.
was video evidence. What if you can't trust video evidence anymore? That changes a lot. I think there's smart people working on solutions. Adobe in particular has been working on ways of validating raw video, to make sure that stamp it and show what is real and what isn't. I think there's an identity piece to this that's super interesting. I think we're going to be swinging back around to be much more interested in identity-based technologies, validating who people are on the internet for certain use cases. I don't have a solution yet, right? And I haven't seen anybody stand up and say they've got an idea for it, but I am encouraged by the fact that there are smart people working on that problem, and we're going to need to look to implement those solutions as soon as they become available.
Is I think I'll give the group a chance because we're kind of ticking down on time. I have another couple questions, but if the group has any questions for Dave, speak now if you have any questions. Hearing and seeing none. Hearing and seeing none. Okay. Um, let's see. What do you think about the use of deceptive technology in securing a business? Do you think that that's something that is fad, or is it something that is coming online? Just kind of
It's
a thought.
actually it's a head fake. And what I will say is it's, look, it's going to be a thing. It's always going to be a
I mean,
thing.
that'd be like
Criminals
the
are always
classic honeypot, right? To kind of
yeah.
trick
But
people into
but but
tickling
I'm
your
gonna
tickler. And
yeah, but I'm going to remind everybody that the number one way to break into businesses is people. It's social engineering. It's
right,
manipulating people, making them click things. It's nothing more complicated than that.
right,
And so I mean, that is like overwhelmingly the majority of the things that you need
right,
to
right,
focus on is, and I this, we get overcomplicated on security sometimes.
right.
It's about making people aware of the problem and then giving them the tools and trainings to be smart on these things.
That was a great statement right there. We get overcomplicated sometimes. That's
Yeah, I mean, and sometimes, I still get angry. I still get upset. I hang out in multiple of the Reddit groups and Slack groups and all of the places MSPs hang out, and I get so bothered by anybody who tells me that, oh well, I have a customer that won't do multi-factor authentication. It's like, you are part of the problem. Like like you and your customer are part of the problem. This is not something that any of us that spend any time thinking about debate, right?
right.
Multi-factor authentication is not an option. It is a requirement. And the fact that you're allowing customers to still do that, like, why are they your
And
customer?
And it's become so simple now. I mean, compared to the days when you had to have your key fob with your RSA. Remember your RSA
Right,
token you had to carry on with you wherever you went and all. It's so
right.
easy now compared to that.
Right. And by the way, like, be realistic. So, and I'll use a very personal example in this. My wife loathes multi-factor authentication, right? Like, absolutely loathes it. Right. And I enforce it. I run the IT infrastructure of both her business and my business. And any technologist will laugh and go, like, of course she hates it. But you know what? I say the same thing every time. You like it more than paying out the money to somebody stealing all your data.
Right.
That's the difference. We can pay for this in a little bit of annoyance every single time, or we can do it one big one when they come and steal our data and we get it ransomed, or it gets hacked, or it gets taken away and we've got to pay out a big ransom. How would you like to pay? I would rather pay in the small little annoyances of multi-factor
Yep.
authentication than in the big one at the end.
Yep.
That's how this works,
Yep.
and
Yep.
it can be simple, and it is more about people and education than anything else.
Yep. Yep. Okay. Very good. Um, as we kind of wind down here, and I want to be respectful for your time, respectful of your time. Um, just one more question here. Is there or are there a couple of technologies that really have you excited for 2023 and beyond? Is there something that's really kind of tickling your fancy right now that you're kind of into and you're being technology Jones about?
So the area that I'm super intrigued by is SaaS management. is because it's a hard problem. And I laugh and go, like, I'm commentating and tracking it because I don't have the solution. If I had a solution, I'd launch a company in this space, but I don't. So I'm watching those that are trying. My premise is this, right? If in the world that I talked about at the beginning of the show, where everything is SaaS enabled, particularly for small and mid-sized companies, right? You're going to have anywhere between the 38 to 249 SaaS applications running in a particular business. You've got to know which ones they are. You've got to enforce policy access on a regular basis. You need to ensure that the data is there and you can potentially back it up. Like, there's so much to this space. And it's going to be really hard because each of those SaaS vendors wants you using their portal and being very sticky to them. And so pulling this all together into a single or even, small number of management platforms, it's going to be really hard, but I see it as a really vital piece, and it looks very different from the traditional infrastructure management tools of the past 20 years because the problem's a little bit different, right? We don't get to control all of the parts. We more need visibility and to be able to pull some of the levers and get alerts and be alerted to conditionals. That's going to be a really interesting space, particularly because you talk about everything that I just talked about in terms of business technology, productivity, the productivity layer. It's all going to run in these SaaS apps. Well, I got to be able to see them. I got to know what's going on in them. I'd like to have a central dashboard to that. That's going to be a cool space.
Are you familiar? Are you talking about like a tool? Like, I use a tool called Shift. Are you familiar with Shift?
I'm not as familiar with Shift. There's a bunch of companies in the space, and this list is not an endorsement. It's more a statement of, like, I'm watching companies Augment, SaaS Alerts, SaaSleo just got bought by Auvic. There's is it Cloud Pass? There's a list of these. I literally just went through them on the show because there's a Gartner report on the space, and they're kind of all baby companies, right? They've just had their Series A's or Series B's, so small investment rounds. They're building out they've got a minimum viable product in the space. They all look a little different. But I think that's going to be the big next space, and I'm super intrigued to see what happens there.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. So if someone wanted to do a little research about that space, just SaaS management, what would you even look for?
So I covered that last week on the show. I think I want to say last Thursday's episode.
Well, and there's encourage everyone to check it out.
Yeah, there's a Gartner report, and the reason I'm referencing that is there's a Gartner report that digs into that space, which I would sort of say is like, hey, my show leads into the Gartner report, and that's a great place to start the reading on that.
Very good. All right. Well, we're at about 12:45. So if you wanted to kind of give out your information and some information about the links to your various podcasts and informational tools, I mean, because you, like I said, you are the P. Diddy of IT space.
So nice.
So the media mogul here. So if you want to give out some of those, I know the folks on this call on this show would like to check some of those out.
I'm easy to find. All my resources are at businessof.tech. The stories come out every day. You can sign up for the daily newsletter. If you want to get the stories, I do a weekly newsletter. Of course, the podcast comes out every business day, and the YouTube show comes out twice a week. It's however you like to get your your information. I put it on all those places. You mentioned my email. I'll throw it out there too. I'm just dave@mspradio.com. So I'm easy to find, and yes, it's me on the other side of the email. I do actually respond to all my own emails, and I write you back. So if you've got anything,
he does. I can attest to that. So
or find me on LinkedIn or Facebook or any of the socials. I'm easy to find.
Yeah. Dave, again, well, I guess maybe you could witness the wheel of fun and excitement.
Sure, let's take a whirl.
You can enjoy the fun for that. So Piper, are you ready to do the wheel of fun?
Yes, I have it pulled up, and I do know that some of us have been asked here to be your backup, but I tossed you guys on there anyways, just to spice it up a little bit. But let's see here. Just share that first, and here we go. I know it's kind of hard to see. Sometimes it's all the extra stuff gets in the way, but it'll still spin, and you can still see who it is. Right.
Oh, Mike. Nice. Mr. Smithers.
Congratulations, sir.
That's
Thank you.
awesome.
Thank you much. Thank you.
That's awesome. Very
Uh,
good. Congratulations. Mike. And Dave, again, thank you very much for your time today. It's always awesome talking to you, man. Just the information. I always get a list of things that I'm going to go out and check and research. So
I love coming on. Have me back anytime
Yeah.
you need.
awesome. Thank you, sir. And I will encourage people to go out and check out his podcast and the information. I check it out as often as I can, and I pull a lot of good information off of it. It's digestible. It's very consumable. 5-10 minutes.
5 minutes a day,
Yeah,
or the
5 minutes.
20
Yep.
minutes a week, depending on how you like to get it.
Yep. No, it's very consumable. So thanks again, and yeah. Good luck with the rest of 2023. Hopefully we'll have you on again in the not too distant future. So
Looking forward to it. Thanks,
all
Keith.
right,
Appreciate it.
thanks. All right,
Cheers.
thanks. Thank you, everybody.